What's going on, guys? Welcome back to SPOILERCAST, a Hungry Gamers offshoot that aims to inform, entertain, and educate you on one particular release from within the geek culture universe. On this episode, we are tackling a game that was released on April 28th on PC, Xbox, and PS5, earning Metacritic scores of 78, 85, and 86 respectively. This spoilercast sees us front-flipping and wall-running across the galaxy far, far away in Star Wars Jedi Survivor, which is, of course, Respawn Entertainment's sequel to 2019's Jedi Fallen Order, published by Electronic Arts. I'm your host, Jono Peck. You can find me everywhere at Jono himself, and joining me to co-pilot the Mantis spacecraft through this spoilercast adventure, it's Zach from News to Reviews. How you doing, Zach?
Oh, yes, I'm doing well. It's been a while since I've got to chat with you, Jono. I think the last time was PAX last year, and then it's been even longer since I got to do a podcast with you. So, yeah, I could think of a few worse ways to be spending Monday night. I'm looking forward to talking about a good game with a top bloke. Let's get stuck into it.
Yes, absolutely. So, setting the scene here, Star Wars Jedi Survivor takes place 5 years after the events of Fallen Order, following Jedi Knight Cal Kestis, played again by Cameron Monaghan, as he fights the Empire while searching for a safe haven for the dwindling, but still very rebellious, Resistance. Zach, top-level thoughts, just generally. What did you think of this game? How was your experience? Because I had a really great time with it, and I'd love to know how it was for you.
Yeah, no, I had a fantastic time with Jedi Survival as well. I think Jedi Survivor, for me, I'd say is a must-play for anyone who's a Star Wars fan. And even fans of just the Souls-like genre. If you've looked at the Souls-like genre and thought it looked a little bit maybe too difficult, a bit hard for you to approach, I think this is the perfect way to get introduced to it because it has difficulty options in it.
Yes.
But yeah, look, it's not without its issues, which, we'll get stuck into that later. But for the most part, it's a easy recommendation, whether you're a Star Wars fan or not.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to put it. I am like a outside looking in fan of those Souls games. I just, at this point in life, don't have the mental determination and time to dedicate to mastering it. I mean, I still play tons of games, so I'm kind of just being lazy with that. But I did bump the difficulty down to like Padawan setting on this game, just so that I didn't take twice as long to finish it. But I think this game was an improvement in pretty much every way to Fallen Order, which I was a fan of. Trying to think if it may, I think it was my game of the year in 2019 when it came out. But it was also one of those games at the time where it just felt like, this was great. Can't wait to see what they do with the sequel. Much like we see often, sequels are often better than the original when it comes to video games, just because they're able to do away with things that didn't necessarily work and expand and improve on depth and gameplay mechanics, which they've definitely done here. A lot of people dropped everything they were doing to play Zelda when that came out, a week or so after this, but I was adamant on finishing this game, which I think says a lot about how engrossed I was in that story and in that experience of playing through it. And I actually think this is the best Star Wars material we've had since the Disney acquisition, right alongside The Mandalorian. For me, like, that's, it's not like I'm a massive Star Wars fan that watches all the movies constantly and has like them ranked in order or anything like that, but just top of my head, bit of recency bias maybe. That was my walk away feeling. I just think this is like a really fun world. Like, it's a world we know, but the Cal Kestis version of it is a bit lighter and it's a bit more adventurous and Uncharted-y, which all good. Yeah, it's a bit more like, it feels a bit more adventurous and Uncharted-like, which, when you're talking about video games, that's always going to be a good thing for me.
Yeah, look, I completely agree with you about it being the best Star Wars content that we have at the moment. I absolutely love it. Jedi Fallen Order, what an excellent foundation they set with that. It was my favorite Star Wars content out at the time, and yeah, I think Jedi Survivor has surpassed it. It's truly great.
Sure. We'll drill down into some of the different elements that make this game what it is. So we'll start with the story, the voice work, the music, everything that kind of builds into that narrative side of this game. So how did you find it story-wise and everything that comes along with that?
I thought it was great, and I thought it was a big improvement on the first title. The setup, that first level where all your companions are all dropping off one by one, we're in spoiler-free section, but it's a very start of the game. But anyway, what a great setup to the rest of the game. They just did a great job with the characterization of all the characters. Funnily enough, it almost felt a little bit more to me like a Guardians of the Galaxy story. It just the way it had all these wacky, wonderful characters, Grease and Merrin, and they're all voice acted to absolute perfection. And probably the one I love the most, and one who just stole my heart. And I think it could have been a big risk. It could have been a Jar Jar Binks, but I think they nailed it. They didn't overdo it, and that is Turgle. I love Turgle. I'll do anything for Turgle. Like, I just want to hold Turgle in my arms and tell him everything's going to be all right. I guess I could just relate to Turgle, as Turgle is just this poor, anxiety-riddled mess. I feel for you, Turgle, that's for sure. And voice acted to perfection by Richard Stephen Horvitz, who I believe was the voice actor for Invader Zim as well too.
Okay,
so,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, very, very, very cool and very well done, and was a cool little character they've thrown in there. But yeah, for the story, I love for the most part, but I found it a little bit uneven in the last act, and I'll get into that obviously when we get into the spoilers section. But yeah, the music fantastic as well. A bit of peppering throughout these sort of what would you call it? Like a sort of ode to John Williams' score. Like, they don't blatantly play it, but they just do little bits and pieces here and there, and it's fantastic. It reminds you're playing a top-notch Star Wars game.
Absolutely, yeah. It's using the same instruments, maybe it's the same keys, whatever it is. You just hear it and know that it's Star Wars without it being exactly the same. And, I think Mandalorian, the TV shows, even the new trilogy of Star Wars movies did that as well. Like, they had kind of like little bits that kind of sample the main themes that we've known for 40 years or whatever it's been without completely just reusing it. And yeah, I mean, the note that I wrote down was it's hard to screw up the music because it's such a unique style that we've come to know and expect over the years. You just have to kind of nail copying that, and they did that perfectly. As you said, it reminds you that you're in that world. And when it comes to, the sound design, again, same thing. We know the sounds of lightsabers. We know the sounds of blasters. I don't know if they had to recreate them from scratch for this game, but it's all nailed. It's all, as most Star Wars games do these days, it's pretty hard to screw that up. But, throw in like the little cute sounds of BD-1 and some of the other creatures and droids and vehicles and weapons. It's, again, just Star Wars nailed to perfection with fantastic, what I would call A-tier voice acting across the board in this game. Like, it's very cinematic. Nothing ever pulls you out and makes you go like, oh yeah, that's right, this is a video game. It's on the same level as a Hollywood level performance, I think. And Brendan Monaghan especially, is it Monaghan? I assume it is. I think that he deserves to be nominated for the annual awards show.
Cameron Monaghan, sorry, that one.
Yeah, Cameron.
Yeah, get
right.
mixed up with
Why
your very own Brendan White, I think. He's a top bloke as well.
Yeah. I didn't know if it was Monaghan or Monaghan, but anyway, whatever it is, that guy, I just call him Ian from Shameless.
That's how I knew him as well, yeah.
Or Gay Jesus, if you've watched the show through to the end. Yeah, I think that he'll be, right there with Dyson Game Awards and all the BAFTA, whatever it is. Like, I think he'll be one of those names at the end of the year that is in the running for those performance awards, because not just the voice acting, but the whole performance capture, and the whole everything he brings to that performance and character really sells it and makes Cal Kestis a very likable hero who has a different feel to other Jedi. And I don't know if it's a narrative thing where he's not part of the Jedi like order because they've been crumbled. He's a bit more free to be his own person. He doesn't have to stick to the rules and worry about the council, and he hasn't got like a master to answer to. So he's a bit more free in that sense. And he's young and cool, which you can't say about a lot of Jedi characters across the years. So, I mean, I've seen some people say that he's like the best Jedi, and I'm not going to say that he's not, because I think that he's right up there. You know, he's right up there for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. The performance was fantastic, absolutely A tier, and I see exactly what you mean. He's definitely taking his own path. He's definitely following his own path, and it's shown through a lot of the decisions that he makes along the way. Even the decision at one stage to decide to use, this isn't a spoiler, I think, because it's literally on the cover of the game. You see him with a blaster in his pocket, but eventually you do get a blaster, and when it's handed to him, he says, I was told not to use these, and Bode says to him, but we got to do what we got to do, and he takes a blaster, and I'm so glad that he does.
Yeah. That was such an awesome moment for me. I was just like, hell yes, like give me that gun. I've been waiting for this. Yeah, I mean, we'll talk a bit about those weapon combinations a bit more in the next section. But the last thing I wanted to say about the voice acting was, as you're navigating these kind of open areas, you come across bounty hunters, droids, stormtroopers, and hearing the conversations between those characters as you're approaching them, and they're just kind of chatting amongst themselves. Really well written. Have to give some shine to the writers of this game. And really well performed. That banter between the droids and the stormtroopers, very funny and light, to the point where if you kind of are rushing in too quickly and interrupt those conversations as they're unfurling, you kind of like, I wish I'd waited a little bit longer to hear where that was going, to hear the punchline or whatever. But they were a lot of fun.
Oh, absolutely. As soon as I figured out that they had these little interactions between each other, I waited every single time. And you were always rewarded for doing that. The dialogue was always hilarious. I remember one in particular very early on, a droid standing out looking over while you're crawling across a cliff, and he's just saying, "Oh wow, look at this massive crater! This is such a wonderful view. I'm doing such a good job of guarding this crater. I wonder if I'll get a promotion. Oh no, but then I won't get to see the view. What a conundrum!" And it's just it's so charming, and it's great, and it's a good chance for them to put a lot of levity into the game as well, when the story for the most part is quite serious.
Yeah. For sure. And there's a lot of different ways they add levity to the game, whether that's being able to give Cal Kestis a mullet and handlebar mustache. But I think the customization, let's skip ahead to a presentation. We'll talk about the graphics and the performance. I think the customization was a very cool add-on to this game that wasn't present in the previous game. You could select like the color of your poncho basically back then.
Yeah, what are you talking about, Jono? You had 40 different ponchos to choose from. What more could you want?
Yeah, well, this time we got bomber jackets. We got like you can dress up like Obi-Wan Kenobi if you ordered the the pre-order or the JB Hi-Fi bonus. And yeah, there's like just so many cool different outfits and combos that you could mix and match with different hairstyles and different facial hair. And I thought that was just a cool little thing to make Cal Kestis yours. Much like, looking at a game like GTA with the GTA 5 with the 3 protagonists, or why I'm having a mind blank, but Arthur Morgan in Red Dead Redemption 2, like it's the same character, but you're able to just like slightly change the way that they come across, and I thought that was fun.
Yeah, it's great. Like you see a clip of someone else playing it and they go, oh, they've gone for that haircut and that outfit. Like everyone has their own Cal. And for me, canon haircut is, yes, that glorious mullet. It was great. I love seeing it flowing through the wind when you were like gliding across gaps. It was fantastic. I thought the lightsaber customization maybe took it a little bit too far. I don't need to change the grip on the lightsaber from a rubber grip to a wooden inlay grip. But I'm sure there's lots of Star Wars fans who are just absolutely creaming themselves over that. That was probably the greatest thing ever to them. It'd be cool if, like, for people like me who don't care too much about that, to be able to just swap out the entire sets. But the fact they've gone so hard on all the customization, they definitely listened to the fans who complained about only having ponchos to choose from in the previous game. And yeah, they've given us so much. And yeah, customizing BD1 as well too. It's great.
Yeah. So visually, I think, this is a very beautiful world that they've created here. There's not as much variety as probably some other games of this size. But visually, I thought it was probably like a step below like your Horizon Forbidden West level of open world beauty, but it's still up there with some of the really great open world games. And I think it's helped the fact that it is exclusive to the new generation. Like, they don't have to make it work for the PS4, for the Xbox One. It can kind of make the most of that, powerful hardware. And that probably plays into some of the performance issues that a lot of people have talked about since this game came out. I think you had more of an issue with it than I did. And I don't know if it's that I don't have the eye for it, but I played with performance mode at the 60 frames per second, and I really didn't notice the slowdowns or the stuttering or whatever it might be. And I'm really glad that I maybe don't have that eye for it, because it seems to have bothered a lot of people.
Yeah, I think I've definitely been spoiled by the recent console generation. All of these Sony first-party games running at 60 frames per second steady with like at 1440p resolution. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart running at 60 frames with RTX on. It's just absolute wizardry, and it looks stunning and plays fantastic. So yeah, I've definitely been spoilt now. I can really tell when I've gone from 60 to 30. It stands out a lot, but it's not really a deal breaker for me so long as I'm getting some kind of steady frame rate, which for me that was definitely not the case with Jedi Survivor. Now I would say about 60% of the game ran mostly pretty well. Like, any of these smaller areas ran pretty well with just maybe a little bit of stuttering when you're in combat situations. But man, exploring Kobo, my frame rate just absolutely tanked. It was definitely above 30, but it wasn't a consistent frame rate. And this would happen when I was just running through the environment. If I was riding one of those weird chocobo looking things, it would definitely happen a lot then. Yeah. And it was a little bit disappointing that such a great game was sort of hindered by these performance issues. I'm glad it was mostly in Kobo where you were dealing with that, though Jeddah I did have a bit of an issue with Jeddah as well, which it was another of the larger locations. But it wasn't just frame rate issues that I was having there as well too. I had several crashes while exploring Kobo, and some graphical issues, like really severe pop in, and some areas where just the trees and stuff just won't ever pop in. It will just stay looking like this weird PlayStation 1 texture or something. Right. So yeah, I don't know. For me it felt like one that, while I can still recognize it's a great game, it just needed a little bit more time in the oven, just a little bit more development time.
Yeah, I did notice the pop-in, especially in those large areas where you can see pretty far into the distance. That's, I feel like, kind of like forgivable in that we're just so used to it in big games. But yeah, compared to some of those like top tier, as I mentioned, like Horizon's a great example. Compared to that, I think that it does stand out as not being at that A-list level. But we have varying allowances that we make for games. People aren't really complaining about the same thing in Zelda, which is certainly having the same issue as far as not being the high performance running 60 frames kind of thing, and you just kind of accept it because it's you just have different standards.
Nintendo, man.
Exactly.
Nintendo fans are bloody rabid. They'll take whatever they can get, and they love it. Look, yeah. I'm kind of glad I played Jedi Survivor before starting Tears of the Kingdom, because it sort of eased me into that lower frame rate. But it's definitely been an issue for me with Tears of the Kingdom as well too. They need to update their hardware. Anyway,
that's a story for another day.
Yes.
But I think it does speak to how excellent this game is, that we both had a really great time despite some of those things. Let's talk a little bit about the the gameplay, the puzzles, the combat, the weapons we've touched on. I ran with the blaster combo and the double saber. They were my two stances of choice. And for people listening who aren't familiar, you can choose two stances out of 5 or 6 different variations of lightsaber combinations. They were my two. Ran with the orange lightsaber, but I'd love to know what your preference was, Zach.
I went with the blaster as well. Once I got used to that range, I could not let go of that. I always had the blaster and then would change out my other stance, but the main one I stuck with was the dual wield. That parry special move that you have was just absolutely goated, and I played a majority of the game like that. I think I changed up my lightsaber colors a little bit, but I went for the Mace Windu for a while there with the purple lightsaber. Yeah.
Nice. I did like that they added that. That was one of those things that I mentioned at the top, where the sequel goes a bit deeper, and they added the stances, which reminded me of Ghost of Tsushima. I know a lot of games probably do this. People talk about maybe Neo or something like that. But it was a shame, I felt, that you had to just kind of pick two of those and concentrate on that, because you'd invest into the skill tree, and then a new one, you discover a new one, and the last one that you get is the old Kylo Ren. What do they call that one?
Crossguard, I think it is.
Yeah, the crossguard. And by the time I got that, I was like, I'm so invested into these other two that I'm not gonna use this really, unless I'm forced to. So that is a shame. I feel like it would be good if you could kind of more easily alternate between them. But I did think maybe this is an allowance for replayability. New Game Plus, you can go back with a bunch of other cool add-ons that they've included for New Game Plus and play it in a different way that kind of changes your experience, keeps things fresh if you are going through the story again.
Yeah, look, it was an issue for me for sure, only be able to choose between two stances at a time. It felt like with 5 stances there to choose from, it was so limiting just to have those two to choose from. And I think the down on the directional pad was tied to doing stuff with BD1, which is very necessary for a lot of story stuff, but I would have much preferred to have had a third stance slot, or figure out a way that we can change it up on the fly, like just changing the menu. That would have been great. But really, it is just a little nitpick, because these new stances were just so much fun to play around with. Particularly the blaster was just so good, having that range on your enemies. And yeah, God, I did really like the double blade as well too. That was great for reflecting back those laser beams.
Anything that reminds me of Darth Maul, I'm like, yes, let's do this. The puzzles, I felt like, they were never ridiculously hard, but they did require you to stop and use your brain a little bit. I did like that they incorporated some abilities with BD1 to solve some of those puzzles. But I had the same issue as I did with God of War Ragnarok, where you're revisiting a lot of locations in this game because they've created such large environments, bigger than they have in the previous game. So you find something, a cliff or a room that's locked, or you can see like a chest or something that you can't open, and I'm like, is this for New Game Plus? Is this something I'm supposed to come back to later? Is there a solution here that I'm not aware of? Do I have to keep looking? Do I have to forget about it? I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and that's a frustrating thing for me as a player, because I'm like, okay, do I like make a note of where this is on the map? That's never going to happen. I'm never going to come back here. I'll just forget about it. And that's just the nature of the choice that they made to have these larger settings that you return to, I think.
Yeah, so that wasn't an issue for me. I'm one of those brain broken people who just loves chasing after platinum trophies, and the idea of approaching something and sort of figuring out, okay, it's clear I need a ability or power in order to solve this puzzle, and coming back to it later, I absolutely love. I loved going back through and exploring once I had fully upgraded Cal to take on all those interesting side bosses. And I thought the puzzles were just a great way to break up the combat and reward you for exploring the environments. I thought they didn't overstay their welcome. You know, they weren't too intense. There was no, I don't think there was any puzzles which really stumped me for more than a few minutes. But it was, great to break up the gameplay like that.
And they added these areas, I can't remember exactly what they called them, like Jedi Guardian Temples or something. Do you remember?
Yeah, it was like the Force Temples or something.
Yes, yeah. And that, from what I gather, is their response to like Breath of the Wild, like adding these temple areas that you can go to and have unique puzzles that you have to solve to get a power up or to get a special ability or ability point or whatever it might be at the end of that unique puzzle. I didn't do all of those. I haven't chased the platinum, but I'm guessing you have, or you're going to go back to all of those?
No, yeah, I wanted to make sure I knocked it out before I started Zelda, and it was like a couple of days before I managed to get the plat for this one. So
nice.
Yeah, nice. There was one that bloody got me. Look, I won't say because it's a solution to a puzzle, and I'll leave that for spoilers later on.
Sure.
But yeah.
So one thing that I did like that they removed as far as the gameplay and traversal was the first game had a huge reliance on these kind of slippery dip sliding sequences where you're just constantly...
yeah.
Do you remember just sliding down really long paths and having to platform and jump over gaps? And they removed that, thankfully. There's small versions of it, but they're just very brief. They're normal. There are a normal amount of them compared to... It seemed like they loved it the first time around. And in the same way they removed that, they added a couple of new tweaks to platforming that made you feel even more powerful as a Jedi. There's the dash in the air. There's the dashing through the green walls that lets you use your ability again. It's very Celeste-like. It reminded me of those kinds of platforming tricks that we've come to love over the years. So I respect that they tried to mix it up and just add a bit more platforming finesse to this one.
Oh, some of those force tears where they'd have you'd be in the air for the entirety of the level, for a full 2 minutes, because you're swinging on ropes and you're air dodging through shields, which gives you an extra air dodge to use again, which you use to get across even further. Some of them took me 10 to 20 attempts to get through some of those, and that they were a lot of fun as well too. Very Respawn, you're feeling the Titanfall DNA there when you're doing the wall running and stuff. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I'm definitely glad they pulled back on doing the slippery dips. They were definitely a bit much in Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah, and the last thing I wanted to say as far as the gameplay was the side quests. They went to a long way to add new mini games and challenges, and there's bounty hunters that you can take down. There's a kind of gambling mini game. There's challenge rooms where you have to do some kind of combat challenge within a time limit, or a traversal challenge, and they just mix things up as you're exploring the world and come across these collectibles. You're finding a lot of collectibles, so it mixes it up when you find one. You go, oh, it's not just another color to paint BD1. It's actually going to give me a different gameplay experience.
That was great. Have you defeated all the bounty hunters?
No, I actually found it. I didn't go looking for them. I kind of just ran into some of them like by happenstance, and
Yep,
I haven't. I haven't. I kind of wished that I ran into more of them. Without having to go exploring to find them. But I'm guessing something cool happens once. Yeah. Okay.
It's definitely a post-game thing, but I definitely recommend seeing that side quest through to the end. Very cool.
Okay. All right. I might have to YouTube that one. Let's talk about just some of the nitpicks and gripes and bugs that we experienced before we move into the spoiler territory. Was there anything that you wanted to shout out that hasn't been discussed as yet?
Yeah, no, combat fantastic. The Souls-like gameplay is great. Parrying is amazing. It never ceases to be satisfying when you deflect a laser back at one of your enemies. Fantastic gameplay. Cannot fault it.
Mm-hmm. So if we're talking about nitpicks and gripes, I think my main issue was the lack of locations in this game. You revisit the same, feels like maybe 3 areas multiple times, and then there's a couple other ones thrown in there. And there's a new one that I remember visiting kind of later in the game, and it was like, oh, finally, it's like something different. I feel like I've been in, Jeddah and Kobo for like at least 50 or 60% of this runtime. So by that point, I was getting very much over those same planets, even though they are jam-packed with secrets and extra areas to uncover and side quests, or rumors as they call them, that I still hadn't got through all of, but I just wanted to see something different. So that was probably my main issue. And I did think it was clever the way they threw in those shortcuts to let you get to a point sooner, and having it more of an experience of getting around this level to make it kind of like draws it out, but then lets you avoid that long experience when you are retreading, because that would have been pretty frustrating. But yeah, that did lead to just reusing the same environments. And I think when it comes to a game like this, Star Wars, we want to see the desert planet, the ice planet, the green planet, the planet in the sky. Like, you just kind of want that variety, because it's a different flavor, and that was probably my main issue.
Yeah, I'm totally there with you with that criticism. I like my biggest issue, aside with Jedi Fallen Order, which is the performance issues that I had and the bugs and whatnot. Everything else is definitely just nitpicks and small issues and gripes and the lack of variety in the planets. I definitely felt that. It would have been nice for there to have been one more decent planet, like decent area to explore, something closer to the size of Jeddah. As you mentioned, you really only have 2 larger areas to explore. Kobo is just absolutely massive. You do spend most of your time exploring Kobo. It would have been cool if maybe they just pulled back a little bit on Kobo and looked at doing another planet, or preferably, we'll get into this later on as spoilers, a later location, maybe having a bit more to do there. I totally agree with you with that criticism. And my other nitpicks were just around the slots for the stances that I already mentioned before. But I think that I felt this with Jedi Fallen Order, and I certainly feel it with this title, that the Souls-like checkpointing that they do has just become completely redundant. There's so many checkpoints, they are absolutely everywhere, and so many shortcuts. You're right where your battle is, basically, anyway. So it kind of just becomes tedious to just do this quick run through, 30-second run through a few enemies to get to a boss fight over and over again. They don't punish you very much for losing. You lose like all the experience points you gain, but the levels that you've already accrued, you still have. And all you have to do to get that back is just hit an enemy. So the punishment wasn't there for failing, and the checkpoints just, I don't know, it feels weird in the Star Wars universe to kill a bunch of stormtroopers and then go sit down for a minute, and then all those same stormtroopers are just back there. It doesn't work narratively, and I don't think it complements the gameplay at all.
Yeah. And it almost benefits you to lose against the boss, because then there's like a heal, like if you get your life force back, so to speak, it heals you completely, so you can use that as an extra med kit, basically.
Yeah, well, I noticed when you would hover over or get your life force back, it would refill your blaster ammo as well too. So I made sure to use all that up as soon as I got in there, and then when the health got low, go refill that blaster ammo and my health. So, yeah.
There you go. Tactics, tips and tricks from Zach. Okay, well, let's just give our final thoughts before we move into spoiler territory. For me, my final thought is a question: is this the best Star Wars game ever?
That's a big question. I'm not the biggest Star Wars game fan, so I'm probably not the best person to ask. Like, it's hard to beat the nostalgia of Star Wars Battlefront 2 back on the PS2 back in the day. That was some real good stuff. But I think if this had released with all of these issues ironed out, and give it a couple of months once it's had a few patches and it is running at a decent frame rate and people aren't experiencing these issues, then I think it would be very safe to give it an accolade like that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've probably got it up there with KOTOR. It's a different type of game, and KOTOR probably hasn't aged so well, being that pre-Mass Effect BioWare, where everything draws to a halt as you make your combat decisions. It's very dated these days, but KOTOR remake, if that ever comes out, could take the crown. But I'm going to give it to Jedi Survivor. Just let's just call it maybe recency bias if you're not happy with what I'm saying. But to everyone else, this is the best Star Wars game. And shout out to Phantom Menace on PS1, because that was an awesome game too, for a not so awesome movie.
Oh, yes, you could also reflect lasers back in that one, I remember.
That was awesome. Good.
There's
good
always
time.
a bigger fish. Yeah, no, I think Jedi Survivor is a worthy successor to Jedi Fallen Order. It's just a bit of a shame it was hampered by these performance issues and whatnot, but I would have totally have agreed with you.
Yeah, and looking at the Metacritic score, it seems to be worse on PC compared to the console cousins. So if you are yet to pick it up, I'd suggest maybe go with the console. There's been probably a couple patches by this point, so as of hearing this, the game's probably running a little bit better than it did at release.
It's a little bit better, yeah. The user score on Metacritic right now for the PC version is sitting at 2.8. So yeah, definitely. I know there's a lot. You get a lot of review bombs and stuff like that, but I'd still say I'd wait for a lot of patches on PC.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is the spoiler-free section. We're going to move into the uncharted space of spoiler territory. And we're going to start it off with a recap of the story. We'll kind of tag team this as we go through the dot points. So 5 years after destroying a Jedi holocron, we've got Jedi Knight Cal Kestis working as a resistance fighter under Saw Gerrera. He teams up with his friend Bodhi Akuna to steal military data on Coruscant. And during the mission, they are confronted by the Ninth Sister, who kills all of their allies, but is ultimately defeated by Cal, leaving only he and Bodhi as survivors. Despite their efforts, the Empire has grown more powerful.
With their ship damaged, Cal seeks help from Grease on the planet Kobo, which is threatened by the Bedlam Raiders led by Ravis. Cal activates a device called the Forest Array and has force visions of two Jedi who discovered the hidden planet of Tanalorr. Cal frees the Jedi Dagon from hibernation, but discovers that he has fallen to the dark side and escapes with Ravis and the Bedlam Raiders.
Realizing the importance of Tanalorr, Cal, Bodhi, and Grease repair their ship and head to Jeddah, where Sia, Merrin, and Eno Cordova are working with the Hidden Path resistance organization. They research Tanalorr to learn about its history. Cal and his companions decide to search for 3 compasses that can navigate the Kobo abyss. During their journey, Cal and Merrin share a kiss.
Woo woo! They managed to salvage 1 compass after defeating Ravis and Dagon. However, Bode... Is it Bode or Bodhi? I don't know. I've been saying Bode this whole
Let's go
time.
shout out to Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze in what's that movie from the 80s?
Oh fuck! I think I know what you're talking. Is it like Breakpoint or something like that?
Yeah,
Or...
Swayze, Keanu Reeves. They've remade it. Point Break, yeah. Break Point.
Break.
Point
Break.
Break.
I had it backwards. Break Point.
Let's say shout out to shout out to Point Break. Let's go with Bodhi.
Bodhi it is. Bodhi betrays them, fatally shooting Cordova and stealing the compass. Cal pursues him and discovers that Bodhi is a fallen Jedi. The Empire attacks the Jedi archives on Jeddah, resulting in Seer's death. Cal tracks Bodhi to the Nova Garan system and confronts him, learning about Bodhi's past and his deal with the Imperial Security Bureau, ISB. Bodhi escapes with his daughter, Kata, and the compass.
Cal embraces his darkness to escape the Imperial garrison, but stops himself from going too far. He recovers a recording from Kree explaining how to use the arrays on Kobo to open a path through the abyss. Cal and Merrin fight Bodhi to protect Carter and finally defeat him. They mourn the deaths of Seer, Cordova, and Bodhi and decide to adopt Carter. They plan to make contact with the hidden path and relocate them to Tanalorr, which is now under their control. So that's the story summarized by ChatGPT. So it's probably missed a few things here and there, but we don't want to be here recapping all day. Zach, let's talk about the biggest moments. I'm looking at what we've both written down, and we might go kind of chronologically. So let's start with what you've got there, the opening level and first arriving on Jeddah. What was it about that stood out to you?
So the opening level, as I mentioned earlier, you're starting with this ragtag group of characters who they've done a great job at characterizing all those different guys and gals, though I don't ask me any of their names because I do not remember now. I played this weeks ago, but them being picked off one by one and Bodhi being the only one who survived that whole ordeal. Which, considering the big turn later on, makes a little bit more sense why he managed to escape that whole situation. But yeah, that was just such a great way to start to kick off the game. Cal has this moment where in a rage once he defeats the Ninth Sister. I believe it's implied that he cuts her head off, right? I'm pretty sure you see it sort of roll a bit out of frame.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually.
Some fucking dark shit right there. Jedi chopping off heads. But yeah, I was into it, and you could really feel the weight of Cal's actions. You could definitely feel that he was reeling with his choices and the grief of losing his crew throughout the start of that opening level, and they did a great job with the opening of Jeddah as well too. I think one of the greatest strengths with the story here was having this 4 or 5 year time gap. It allowed for not only things to obviously progress when we aren't around with the different characters and their relationships, but yeah, we're sort of unraveling the mystery throughout the start of the game of where Cal is in his life at this time and where all these characters have ended up. And getting to see Merrin once again, who was one of my favourite characters from Jedi Fallen Order, who I really wasn't expecting a space witch to just be thrown into the mix right towards the end of the game, was fantastic. The whole event when you arrive at Jeddah and the entire place is under a massive sandstorm. And you're fighting off enemies. At one stage, you have to fight off. Is it AT-AT? Is that the chicken walker?
An AT-AT.
Or is that
yeah.
Yeah, have to
so.
fight the AT-AT.
I don't know.
Um, that whole segment was fantastic. So it was a great way to reintroduce Merrin once again and sort of show how Merrin and Cal's relationship has progressed throughout this time gap. And also just lots of fun Star Wars action, fighting off enemies through a sandstorm and riding giant space giraffe things. Great. The Spammels. Oh, so good.
Yeah.
So good. Yeah. Those levels there really stood out to me. What do you think of them, Jono?
Yeah, I did like the whole kind of like captive Wookiee trick that they play in the opening level, where Cal's the prisoner of those two big lugs that end up being his allies. It's a good way to introduce, like they do a great job of introducing the mechanics and the controls of the game slowly as you go through, and use your Jedi mind trick on someone, and you're doing all these different things to kind of just slowly refamiliarize yourself with how this game works and who the different characters are that you need to know. And then, so from there, and then you mentioned Turgle before. I think you've probably gushed about him, and that the experience of rescuing him leads into walking through the cantina for the first time. And I thought that was a really cool moment for me, just to see them capture that feeling that you get from, especially Star Wars A New Hope and going into Mos Eisley and seeing the kind of who's who of freaks and geeks that hang out there, and the random music that's playing, and all the people you can talk to and recruit from around that area to head back to the bar. That was a really, really cool setting and location, I thought.
Yeah, it was the first time walking in there. I'm not gonna lie, I was a tad bit disappointed because I was expecting that the whole thing, tons of different characters in every single corner, and the band doing the I had my mind sort of set in that when I heard Cantina. But by the end of the game, once you meet all these different characters, mostly on Kobo, but also throughout other places in the galaxy, and your cantina slowly gets more populated, you meet like a DJ, and they rock up, and they have all these different tracks that they play in their cantina that you can choose from. They have that really charming butler bar robot that's fantastic. But you have the fish tank upstairs with that really cool shrimp guy that's just hilarious, who you can listen to his stories as well. But by the end of the game, the cantina was always a joy to walk through and see what's happening with all the locals.
Literally watching the flowers bloom on the rooftop as well. I didn't really understand like the point of that. I was like, is this gonna am I gonna use these to craft med kits or something? But it was just literally an aesthetic thing, wasn't
it? Honestly, it wasn't a bother for me. I was like, it kind of, because you could collect seeds in the previous game, and you'd sort of see them growing in the terrarium just on the ship. But they've just decided to go, yeah, fuck it, just have a full garden on a rooftop, and it is pointless. You don't get any boons from it. But I thought it was a bit more of an interesting and creative way of handling that collectible. I liked it.
Yeah. So you mentioned experiencing Merrin's powers on Jeddah at that point where you escaped the sandstorm and the enemies and everything. That was such a cool sequence. It was very kind of like almost like a Naughty Dog Uncharted-esque kind of platforming traversal, just a wild ride that begins and ends, and you just kind of have to take a breath at the end of it and go, whoa, like that was intense, that was spectacular, very cinematic, and it kind of ended with that kiss between Cal and Merrin. I didn't really see it coming as far as a relationship. I didn't remember Merrin from the first game.
Okay, wow.
Because it's been 4 years, and I probably should have watched previously on Star Wars Jedi, but I didn't. So I was just like, cool chick. Don't understand the backstory here between them, but it was she was presented really, really well, and as kind of like a a almost not quite a yin to his yang, but they're different enough in their personalities and their powers that you kind of go, yeah, this is a pretty cool combo, and I'm sure that we'll see more of her in potentially the next game. The next huge moment that I thought was the big twist with Bodhi/Bode, of him actually betraying everyone and attacking, your base there on Jeddah and being a secret fallen Jedi. What do you think of that?
Look, I didn't particularly see it coming. I knew something was going to happen with Bodhi. There had to be something
hints, yeah.
because there was just all this. He really wants to look after his daughter. He's a dad. That's his whole thing. But I didn't know what it was going to be. I thought either he was going to die, you'd have to avenge him, or who knows. For me, at the moment it happened, I enjoyed the twist. But then the more I thought about it, I remembered that, and it's been 4 years since I played Jedi for, I think 3 years. I think I played it when the PS5 version came out, but I don't remember 100%, but I'm pretty sure they did the same thing in Jedi Fallen Order, where there's a secret Jedi, but in Fallen Order it was Seer, and in this it was Bode. So it was like, okay, I get it. You're doing the third act secret Jedi thing once again. I did like it in the moment. I thought they did a good job with it. It was just on reflection, realizing they kind of followed a very similar formula to the first one. Put it this way, I hope they don't do a secret Jedi in the next title. If they do it again, then it's just, okay, guys, that's a bit much.
Yeah, I guess it's just because you've seen him fight so much with the jetpack and the guns, and you're just thinking he's just a really good Han Solo kind of dude. Like he's just a scrappy go-get-'em fighter, and he's actually hiding these lightsaber powers and force abilities, and it just kind of, I felt that it was an effective twist, and of course it leads almost straight into the appearance of Darth Vader, which you're always hoping for in a game like this, especially after the first game did so well to incorporate him. But fighting a Seer, I think, was a fun way to kind of make it a bit different than that first time around.
Yeah, this might have been my favorite sequence of the entire game. Just the betrayal and then leading straight into the Empire's attack on the Hidden Paths base in Jeddah was great. And yeah, changing things up by how to play as Seer for a little bit was really cool as well too, especially considering what happens to Seer when all that culminates. But yeah, getting to really flex her powers, you take on a lot of stormtroopers and you're just slaying them down left and right. I think you're using you used bombs or something that you would launch at the ATSTs to destroy those as Seer, and that was really, really cool as well too. It was such a great sequence, and obviously culminating in probably my favorite boss fight of the entire game, which was your fight with Darth Vader playing as Seer. It kicked my ass. I think it took me like 15 or 20 tries to finally take out that bastard. Particularly when we've been playing as Cal the entire time, and then you're thrown into the shoes of another character. It was very, very challenging, but oh my, was it satisfying to finally defeat Darth Vader, and the conclusion was just it was emotional damage. I was an emotional wreck after that one.
Yeah. I didn't have as much trouble because, as I mentioned, I was playing on an easier difficulty, but yeah, I can imagine that would have been quite a challenge. Something we didn't talk about in the spoiler-free section was the accessibility options on this game. Not only is there obviously a range of difficulty, but there's the ability to add like a slow motion combat feature that you can control in quite a bit of detail. So if you want like a little bit of assistance, you just want to slow things down a little bit, you can do that. You can do that while playing on the hard difficulty if you want to still have to avoid damage as much as you can. So they really kind of let you control exactly how difficult you want this game to be, which I think is a nice touch compared to, you know, some games out there. Let's just say, for example, Zelda, which doesn't give you like any options at all as far as you know, remapping anything, pretty much, whether it's controls or difficulty or anything. So
yeah, you can swap the jump and dash. That's it.
That's it. you can't even change you can't even edit the brightness on that game. But you know, Nintendo does whatever they want. That's just, as we said, a story for another day. The next cool moment for me, I thought, was, you know, you infiltrate the Empire garrison we mentioned before, and there's a section where you disguise yourself as, you know, one of the, can't remember the title of people, of those guys, but you know, the Empire bad guys. You dress up in the suit.
Was it the ISB? I think it was.
Yeah,
it's something very innocuous.
Imperial Security Bureau. You're one of the commanders or whatever. It's just, I just love in games when you can like walk around enemies in disguise as an enemy, and it was fun because you could just go up to them and chat to them and like kind of mess with them a little bit and use the force powers to get through the doors, and like that was just a fun sequence for me that was taking a step back from the action, but you know, having a lot of fun with the narrative elements of being hidden in plain sight, I guess. And it then leads to the sequence where you meet Bodhi's little kid, and that starts to draw up all that conflict of, you know, starting to sympathize with his story of losing his wife and having to raise this child, and that was why he had to do what he had to do. And I think, you know, anytime you have a villain that has good intent or good motivations behind, I guess, the terrible decision that they've had to make, that always makes things a bit more interesting and raises the stakes and the tension a bit. So I thought that was really well handled.
Okay, fair enough. But Bodhi's motivations didn't particularly work for me. It didn't make a lot of sense to me that Bodhi would want to, like, it makes sense he wants to go to Tanalorr with his daughter because it'd be safe from the Empire. But is it just literally just going to be him and his daughter? I can't think of anything more horrifying. It's just them two together. It's like being in a prison the size of a planet. It sounds awful, and she's going to grow up super, super fucked up. So I think he needed to think about this plan for a little bit longer. Yeah. Yeah. I enjoyed him as a character, but his motivations seemed a bit wacky to me.
I guess you would have thought he'd prefer to be there with all the Jedi than by himself. But I guess if that was the case, then he might have been fearing that eventually the Empire is going to find us here. They're going to come here and wipe us all out. So it was like, this is the only way I can keep her alive, and that's better than any other alternative. But yeah, I mean, let's talk about maybe least favorite moments, nitpicks and gripes. I didn't have any major ones. I mentioned like not remembering Merrin, so I personally didn't like need that romance angle, but and I'm kind of a fan of not kind of shoving romance into stories when it's not like a romance story, like a rom-com or whatever, or a love story. I don't think it's necessary, but I do understand that it's a crowd pleaser, and it's more that maybe I just think that romance and Star Wars aren't really the best combination. It hasn't always worked out the best in the past, whether it's Anakin and Padme or like Kylo and Rey. I'm just like, why are you two kissing? Stop it. Like,
yes, or Luke and his sister. I'm glad at least this one they're not going the weird incestual tinge that they seem to go with in the movies over and over again. I'm not into it. But for me, I loved Merrin and Cal's relationships. I'm one of them normies, one of them people in the crowd that's pleased by this stuff. I do not like it when it's shoehorned in and it feels like it doesn't fit well into the story. But something about their connection, I could see how they would work, where, you know, Cal is the last, one of the very last of his kind, whereas Merrin is also one of the last of her kind as well too, and they're both sort of trying to hang on to their culture, but also learn learn from their past to improve on their cultures in the future, and just the way they sort of connected over that, but also complemented each other in a lot of other ways. I feel like Merrin was very much the voice of reason throughout Jedi Survivor, and I loved their dynamic. I thought it didn't. I see what they were trying to do with the whole mum and dad Cal Merrin thing with Carter. But for me, that didn't work in particular. So
yeah, it's a bit weird at the end. It's just like, hey, we killed your dad. Now, do you want to come with us?
yeah. So there's the whole showdown, and like literally, you have that the 2-minute interaction in the ISB base or whatever, and then a 2-minute interaction with Carter before going into the boss fight against Bodhi, and you just sort of like, chat with her and sort of say, oh yeah, he's in the wrong here. And she somehow ends up on your side and sees her own
no
father.
Loyalty. No. What kind of kid is this?
Yeah, exactly. I just could not imagine, no matter what Cal or Merrin could have said to her, that would have made her okay with them shooting her father right in front of her eyes. And so she was just so chill. I'll just come hang out on the spaceship with you guys after you've killed Daddy. No worries.
Fan theory: they used the Jedi mind trick on her. She's under their control.
Hey, you know what? Cal does use he does use the mind trick for some nefarious reasons throughout Jedi Survivor. Like there's a side character that you meet that wants to be out exploring Kobo, and for her own good, I guess, he uses Jedi mind tricks to get her to go back to the cantina. But that felt a bit odd to me. You got to get that trophy, so you got to take away the free will of the people of Kobo. But yeah, that would be an interesting explanation. I'm really hoping, it seems like they're setting up something to do with the daughter for the third installment of the Star Wars Jedi series. So I'm really hoping maybe we're going to see her become an antagonist, like grow up and realize, hang on, it was a little bit fucked up that Cal shot me dad, and then joining the dark side and seeing where that goes. I'm down.
All right, let's see it. You've got a couple other here listed, the Dagon and Ravis boss fights you weren't the biggest fan of?
I think the Ravis one in particular disappointed me. I think I'm just I've been spoiled a little bit by From Software games at this point, where they have these really, really epic boss battles where bosses will have these second health bars and second forms where they just turn into these ridiculous monstrosities. And it's sort of teased at early on in the game that Ravis is just a bunch of tentacles underneath his armor. So I was very much hoping we were going to see most of that armor just fly off and just a whole bunch of tentacles and a giant mess of a boss fight to fight. The second form, I believe he does lose one of the pieces of armor comes off the arm, and he starts swinging the tentacles around, which I thought was it was pretty cool. But I thought there was more interesting things that could have been done there. And then as far as the fight with Ravis, it was a fun enough fight, but I guess because it felt like they were setting up Ravis to be the big bad, when I finished it, I was kind of like, oh, okay, that's it. The fight's just over now. But obviously, yeah, they were holding off for the big final act with the big Bodhi reveal. So yeah, I don't know, those boss fights maybe just fell a tad short for me.
Yeah, I think I enjoyed all the boss fights, but again, I was playing on an easier mode where it was just hard enough that I had to like try really hard. I didn't really have to go crazy with like the strategy and all that kind of thing. It was more narrative effect in those encounters for me. So that's what I felt like playing at the time. There's definitely, I think, a bit of nuance to each battle. There's kind of, the way that you fight them. They have different abilities and attacks that you have to kind of maybe learn as you fail, which is I think always a good approach in a game like this. But yeah, maybe they if you stack them up against FromSoft, maybe it is going to fall short. But that's what this game is in terms of the combat. It's FromSoft light, so it's never going to be exactly that, because it's a Star Wars. It needs to be more accessible. They want to sell millions and millions of copies. Not that Elden Ring didn't, but it's a different kind of it's a different kind of market that they're going for sure.
Oh, look! This was not about the difficulty at all. It was the more, how do I put it? Sort of the extravagance of the boss fight, I guess. A bit of a interesting way to describe it. But yeah, I was like some of the bosses you see in From Software are just ridiculous, like a giant snake,
right,
with pulling a sword out of itself. Obviously it's not going to get that ridiculous in a Star Wars game, but I thought Ravis was going to go somewhere crazy with tentacles, but they held back a bit on that.
It was cool fighting Dagon and seeing him like having one arm but still using the Force to control his lightsaber. I thought that was a pretty cool approach that you don't really see a lot of Force ability controlling lightsabers in a fight.
Yeah, I love that. The way he'd throw it around himself and then he'd break them up and throw them each separately. That was fantastic. And even at one point he creates himself a Force arm in the boss fight. Very, very cool idea. Very cool concept.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we might go into the ending, the final battle with Bodhi, and the cutscenes that follow, and what's next for for Cal Kestis and his crew. I thought it was a cool fight towards the end. Like, from that narrative perspective, I appreciate kind of the reluctant battle trope, which for me it reminded me of The Last of Us 2 Part 2 climax, where playing as Ellie, you kind of don't really want to hurt the other person, but you kind of have to, and you've got that kind of conflict of like, well, I guess I got no other choice. So I enjoyed that from that perspective, and I think as far as we got the cutscene with the classic kind of Jedi funeral sequence, and then I suppose the story will continue with more Cal, more BD, more Grease and Merrin. The battle's not yet over. It's hard to know exactly where it will end, just because we know from this universe that something must happen to Cal. I don't know. He's not gonna, Rey was the last Jedi or whatever. It wasn't Cal Kestis. But I don't know. I hope that it's somehow, because we've established the kind of the timeline of this being in between prequels and original trilogy. I hope that it somehow leads into events that are related to, Rogue One or A New Hope or something. Even if it's just like a small kind of like, this is a resistance. There's a resistance that exists that we know about. I just hope that it's maybe the early influence that has a legacy later on. So it is significant to this world. I think that would be a cool way to cap things off in the next game. What do you think about the thing?
The whole Carter being chill with a dad being murdered thing aside, I did think that final battle was great. I was very disappointed with Tenelor. It very much is like, it looks kind of pretty, but there's nothing to do or explore there. I was really hoping that we're going to be getting this one last area to explore and do a bunch of side quests, or see some of the characters from Kobo make their way over to Tenelor. You don't get any of that, so that was a little bit of a disappointment. But the boss fight itself was great. Merrin's using her powers to help you. She's like flying you through the air in the different stages of the boss fight. It's fantastic, and it culminates with that moment where Bodhi and Cal both have their pistols pointed at each other, which makes it adds even more to it, knowing that Cal got the pistol from Bodhi in the first place. Yeah. And you see Cal's hesitance. He doesn't want to pull the trigger, and he doesn't do it. And then Bodhi does. His gun jams, and Cal knows in that moment, I don't have a choice here, and fires that killing shot. And that moment was fantastic. It was handled perfectly. That was a really, really good final sequence, and the funeral at the end I definitely found quite emotional. And as far as looking into the future, as I mentioned before, I'm curious to see, as weird as I found the whole thing with Carter being adopted by her parents' killer. That aside, I'm very curious to see what they do with Carter in the future. It very much seems to me like they're setting something up there. This does feel like it's the middle step in a trilogy to some degree. Yeah, I'm very curious. I kind of want to see old Cal. Like let's age him like another 20 years this time. Carter's grown up and got a handle on all their force powers, and Cal's got the nice salt and pepper beard going, and he's doing his Obi-Wan tricks of just knowing everything about the force. I'm very curious to see what Respawn can do with a third one in the series here.
Is it salt and pepper if you've got a red beard? I don't know.
Yeah,
like
true. You're
cinnamon,
right.
hot cinnamon donut. It's got a bit of sugar on it. Yeah, sugar and cinnamon. Yeah,
salt and paprika. Yeah, let's go.
So, kind of a behind the scenes part of all this is that this is the final Star Wars game published during the EA exclusivity contract with Lucasfilm. It expires later this year. So I wonder how that works as far as Respawn getting a chance to close out the trilogy. Due to the success of this, I really would expect that Respawn will get that chance to finish it out as they intended. You hope that even if EA signs, or not EA, even if Lucasfilm signs, say for example, some kind of contract with Activision or some other big publisher, there would be some kind of clause that allows Respawn to make one more game, because you wouldn't I guess Lucasfilm owns it and not EA, but you wouldn't want another studio to be picking up to finish off the story. That would be weird, and I don't understand how all this stuff kind of works.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens there. I'd say with the success of this, I'd be shocked if we didn't get a third one. I'm hoping what Disney and Lucasfilm are going to do in the future with the Star Wars IP in video games is just leasing it out on a case by case basis, rather than just having it be exclusive to the one publisher. We've only just started to see some decent Star Wars games right at the end of that 10-year commitment. It wasn't looking good with your Star Wars Battlefront microtransaction riddled messes and Star Wars Battlefront 2 with all the loot boxes and all that. It took a while to get here, but we're finally getting some good Star Wars games, and I really do hope it continues. It's a great series.
It's these two and Squadrons. They're the only three, I think, in that time that I would actually say were hits for me. Like, I know that they all sell well because they are Star Wars games. Like Battlefront sells millions of copies regardless, but for what I want from a game, those three were the only ones really that I would rate. But they figured it out towards the end.
And I believe there is some stuff in the pipeline that is outside of EA at the moment. Isn't David Cage's studio working on a Star Wars game?
Yep, that's right. And the KOTOR remake, if that sees the light of day, that's happening with Saber.
Development hell for that one. I was particularly hurt by that because I never played it back in the day, and it's one of those ones that looks like it's probably a bit dated to try and go back to if you don't have the nostalgia there for it. So a remake would have been the perfect way to experience it, but hopefully they get it together.
Yeah, I think that it would be they went pretty far to announce it for them to just cancel it altogether. But it happens. You never know. But it would sell a lot just based on the popularity. All they really have to do is polish it up and give it some modern, combat mechanics for it to, I think, be a success. But they probably were going for a complete from the ground up kind of a dealio there. What is your final words on Jedi Survivor, Zach?
So yeah, one of my favorite titles of the year so far, and as I mentioned at the start of the episode, an easy recommendation for anyone who's a fan of Star Wars or enjoys their Souls-like games, or even if you're a bit intimidated by Souls-like games and you're looking for something to sort of cut your teeth on, this is the perfect title for you. I'd just say consider waiting for a few patches. I feel like a couple of months down the track, things might be looking a bit better as far as the performance is concerned. But overall, a fantastic game. And yeah, on News to Reviews, I gave it a review score of 15 BD1s out of 19 Cal Kestises. I still don't know what the plural would be. Cal Kestisi?
Kesties.
Yeah.
I don't know. Kestai, yeah. No, that's a good one. Yeah, and you know what? With all the people that have dropped this to play Zelda, I think you probably can't really fault them if their intention is to come back to this once it is a bit more polished, because that could very well be the case by the time they're done in Hyrule. I expect to see this popping up on a lot of Game of the Year lists. I think I probably have it. It's hard to say because it's so different, but a slither behind like Dead Space and Resident Evil 4. Probably ahead of Hogwarts Legacy, but it's in my top 3 for sure, Game of the Year wise, from what I've played so far. And, by the end of the year, maybe it's like top 5, but that's pretty good for a year that's shaping up to have some pretty massive game releases. I think that that Metacritic score, they're probably satisfied with that 85, 86, considering the issues that they've had, and if that is only improved through patches and whatnot, then yeah, I think that it's very much worthy of admiration from the Star Wars fan base. And I think, again, like, almost in the kind of Uncharted 2, Uncharted 3 spirit, we'll see even more adventures coming with, a fine tuning of what is great about this game and the things that they've learnt along the way. Because, even if it's just how to get the game to run on the current hardware, they're going to learn a lot from, the backlash and the moments in the game that it struggles the most, and they've got a lot to figure out as they go, and then we might get Respawn to do some pretty cool stuff outside of Star Wars. So it's an exciting, they're in a good place. It's an exciting time for, I think, Respawn to have another hit on their hands, and I look forward to seeing what they do, whether it's this or another series down the track.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Hopefully they do learn from the mistakes of Jedi Survivor, because this series has the potential to be one of the greatest Star Wars game series of all time. I really do hope they nail it with that third one, though. I think we're going to be waiting a while before we hear anything about that.
Yeah, I mean, this was 4 years. It's pretty quick for a game this size to get developed. Compared to, for example, Spider-Man, where we've got that happening 5 years apart, and God of War was basically 5 years apart. So yeah, 4 years is a pretty quick turnaround, especially for such a large game. And who knows, this could be the best Star Wars trilogy by the time it's all done.
Yes. I've got all my fingers and toes crossed for that to happen. I want to play it on the third one on my PS5 Pro at the end of this next console generation. I want to be a smooth 60 frames Star Wars adventure. I can't wait.
Ray tracing, all that. Yep. Well, dear listeners, of course, you can catch all the 8-bit content at 8bit.net or videogamesandculture.com. More than hentai, hungry gamers, all that good stuff. Be sure to rate and subscribe. Make everybody feel nice and warm and fuzzy about those positive reviews. Zach, this is a good chance for you to tell us where we can find you and what you've been up to lately.
Oh, yeah. So I've got a video game podcast called News to Reviews, where we talk about, surprise, surprise, gaming news and review the games that we've been playing. And Lockie and I do this every week. We get a different guest on every week. Jono, you've been on before, a whole bunch of the peeps from the 8-Bit Nation, and we always have a good laugh and get into some real good conversations about video games. So if you love your video games, check out News to Reviews anywhere that you listen to podcasts. We're on everything. And if you want to interact with us on the social medias, then definitely Twitter's probably the best place to do that. Hit us up there, and our Twitter handle is @News2Reviews, and that's with a number 2 instead of the word 2.
Very, very good. And of course, you can catch me at Jono himself. You can catch 8-Bit at We Are 8-Bits. Dear listeners, thank you again for listening. Much love, stay hungry, and may your lives be spoiler-free. I forget what Brendan usually says, but it's something like that.
You said stay hungry, as long as that's in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Got it.